Carrying on with part 3 of our series now, a series that is designed to, first of all, reveal how it is you finally find Jesus, have this dynamic relationship, a relationship that produces results, a relationship that will not only change your personal life, but will change the world around you. We want to get into that. But also, we're not just satisfied with having some self-serving relationship with Jesus that we feel all good about ourselves, but we don't have a burden and don't have a passion for those people out there in society who don't have the belief system we have. And it's not like we have to be marauders going out there destroying their lives. No! People are empty. People are hungry. People know something is going on in the world. And that's why today I want to look at prophecy a little bit. Now, prophecy is great to study. And prophecy is great to understand. What's so interesting about the whole thing is whatever God has ever prophesied absolutely came down to the year, to the month of when it was supposed to happen. So it's, at a minimum, prophecy is just one more proof point that God is alive, God is well, and there is a God. Because when you prophesy about political events taking place, and they take place right on schedule, it has to be proof. Because nobody can just randomly, a few thousand years ago, write about this and all of a sudden have them come up in our day, basically. Now here's the thing. Since the series is about how do you ultimately open yourself up to be used by God, and last meeting we talked about how you and I are the light of the world. We've been granted this huge honor that we are the light of the world. Jesus was the light. He passed the torch to us. We now are the light of the world. What are we going to do with that? And if that doesn't get you burning in desire to go do something, an understanding that you have been given this great honor of being the light of the world, and not only that, but you know, there's an expectation of what you should be doing. If that doesn't put a fire under you, then let's look at prophecy to see where we are in the last days. Because then there's an urgency. See, if there's no sense of urgency, we can have all sorts of beliefs. And a lot of Christians are just really good at that. You can believe something, and we sit around sometimes discussing topics. Oh yeah, what is justification, or what is sanctification? All these big words. And we'll sit around for hours and we'll discuss these things, and finally we come to a conclusion. Well, I would say faith is this, do. Sanctification is this, do. And then we all pat ourselves on each other's backs and we say, cool, this is good. We really understand it. But if you don't apply it, what good is it to understand it? So I started studying prophecy because I personally need sometimes motivation myself. I need something that gets me off top dead center because I'm just as human as everybody else. Some people say, well, you go around preaching around the world, you must really have your act together. No, I'm just like anybody else. I got the same struggles with lethargy and with just, I will do it tomorrow. I'm a procrastinator. And so I struggle with the same thing. So sometimes I have to study certain things in the Bible that gets me motivated. Acts always gets me motivated. I walk away disillusioned. Why? Because so many cool things happen there and it's not happening today. So it makes me think, what's wrong? God isn't wrong. What has changed? God hasn't changed. So maybe I've changed and maybe I'm the problem. So anyways, I went to studying prophecy. And I thought, okay, I am going to study everything about prophecy and try to glean everything I can about prophecy so that at a minimum, not only will I know it all, but at a minimum, I will have some form of motivation, something to put a fire under me, because hopefully I'll discover, like I've always believed, that the end times are near. But you know, sometimes what happens is we look at the end times and we read about people who have been predicting the end times, 2, 3, 4, 500 years ago. My grandfather thought that for sure Jesus is going to come during his day. Well, he didn't. I mean, I don't know if he had time to think about it before he died last few minutes, but he would have been disappointed because he thought for sure it was going to happen. So maybe we don't have this sense of urgency anymore. Maybe the second coming of Jesus isn't a big thing to us anymore because we've seen it predicted so many times, and we don't want to look like fools today by predicting it again. But guess what? If we're in the end days and we're the light of the world, then we better wake up that something may be happening. But here's what happened. I went and studied prophecy, and I spent a serious amount of time studying prophecy because I know it's good and I know it's legitimate, and it really just sort of solidifies my belief that there is a God in the first place and that God keeps his word without a doubt. So I studied the 1260 year prophecy and the 2300 year prophecy and the 490 year prophecy. And I studied all the prophecies about, in Isaiah and different places in Psalm, predicting ahead to when Jesus would come. I studied all those prophecies. But here's what happened to me. I got to thinking, it's really not that relevant to me. 790 years, the 1260 years, the 2300 years. It's really not all that relevant to me. Why? Because I'm a real practical thinking person. Here's why I say that. Am I saying prophecies are irrelevant? No, I'm not. I'm just saying to me, and here's why. Because those prophecies have already been predicted and taken place. And what influence could little old me down here in the year 2012, what influence could I have on whether or not those things were ever going to take place, whether or not those things were even predicted in the first place? I have no influence. I'm just a speck of dust in the universe. I have no influence whatsoever. Yes, they're good prophecies, and they're good for certain things, but in terms of, is it going to get me off top dead center? No, it's like reading, oh yeah, God said this is going to happen, and it happened, and so I can trust His word, and I can trust there is a God and all that. So it's good for that, yes. But this is what began to happen to me. I thought, okay, I'm studying all this stuff, and it's really, interesting stuff, but how is it really relevant for me today? Is it getting me off top dead center? Is it putting a fire under me? No, it isn't, because it's all in the past anyways. Predicted in the past, fulfilled in the past. So I moved on, and I read other prophecies that are going down towards the very end. I went to Matthew 24. Let's go to Matthew 24. New Testament prophecy. Because I want to know, where are we in this whole thing? And prophecy should be a good thing to study. So here, if we go to Matthew 24, which is a chapter of prophecy, written in the New Testament times, here's what it says. Let's just pop down to verse 5, because we won't read the whole thing here, but Matthew 24, verse 5, "For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many." Well, have you ever heard anybody saying that they're Christ? Well, I have. In fact, this one really is dear to my heart, simply because I don't know if many of you have heard about the Waco event a number of years ago, where the Branch Davidians down in Waco, Texas, all burnt up. Nearly 100 people burned up in Waco, Texas. Well, I want to tell you something. My cousin burnt up in that fire. He was the right-hand man to David Koresh. And of course, here's what's really shocking. My cousin had his degree in theology. He also had a master's degree in religion. And my cousin was asked by a very prominent theological school to come and teach comparative religions, because my cousin traveled around the world and he studied at different universities, and he's a very knowledgeable guy about all different religions, Buddhism and Confucianism and Islam, and not only that, but the different doctrinally oriented Christian denominations and stuff. So he was asked to teach comparative religions. But while he was living in Hawaii, working on his master's degree in religion down there, he heard about this guy named David Koresh. And he heard how he's a bit of a disturber amongst Christians. So he thought, I'm used to debating. In fact, when I was younger, when my brothers and I owned the factory in Wisconsin, we would go and stay with my cousin. My wife and I sometimes go down there and stay 3 months, live with my cousin and his wife. So we were close. We hung out. And I used to go, and he would go and get into these debates. Like my cousin could use the Bible like a 44 Magnum or a club like you wouldn't believe. So he had organized all these debates with pastors of different denominations, get them all together, and then he'd have this big debate, and he would just blow them off. And I'm sitting there, it was all-star wrestling for me. Or it was like a boxing fight. I'm almost inwardly cheering, oh yeah, right, give him another right, another left. And he'd just knock them all out. One guy. So I used to envy my cousin. I thought, someday I want to be like my cousin. And yet my cousin read the Bible 2 hours a day. But his motivation wasn't to have a relationship with Jesus, unfortunately, and I'm being judgmental here, I suppose. His motivation was get sharper with the word so you can use a bigger club. Make a long story short, he goes down to share with David Koresh, because he wanted to straighten him out, and he probably would have been the guy to do it. Trouble is they got a hold of him. My brother was down there to visit my cousin at the very time in Hawaii. In the whole 10 days my brother was down there to visit my cousin. My cousin was engaged in discussions with David Koresh and his people to the point where he wouldn't even hardly come home. He was spent hours. They finally indoctrinated, they brainwashed him. They were like, that's the way the devil works. It's a deception all the way. And he got him in there. And for some reason, my cousin moved over into their camp. And we thought, oh yeah, he's a nutcase. In fact, my cousin wanted my brother to go meet this David Koresh, and my brother said, are you kidding? I'm not remotely interested in talking to this guy. So my brother just blew the whole situation off and said, I'm ticked off. I came to visit my cousin, and I wasted all my time here by myself. And so he came home. So from there, they move over. Well, my cousin had a lot of business savvy. In fact, he ran our plant in Wisconsin in our absence. And he's very sharp that way. He's a very intelligent guy. And so, but Koresh needed someone like that. So my cousin was the one who raised all the money, and my cousin was the one who had the finesse and all that with finances, and that's how they bought that place down there. Well, things got worse and worse inside, and I just thought, yeah, he'll wake up one day, and things got worse and worse to the point where David Koresh started to say, I'm Christ. And I thought, how in the world could my cousin, with as much education, theological education as he has, and as much time that he's spent studying, deceptions and things like that, how could he get sucked into following a guy that's now claiming to be Christ? And the rest of the story, of course, is he never did get out of there. Burned up to somebody who said, I am Christ. But that's what the Bible predicts is going to happen in the last days. People will claim to be that. And even the most elect can be deceived because Satan is so subtle sometimes. So we move on. But here's some actually good news for those of us who like to warm pews in church. Here's what it says. It says, well, no, not quite. It says here, and you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Anybody hear any rumors of wars lately or heard about wars? You get your head in the sand if you haven't. We move on. Here's the good news for those of us who are watching for the end times and are trying to use prophecy as a motivating factor to get busy. Here's what it says. The end is not yet in verse 6. Oh, sigh of relief. There's still more time, so we don't need to get really motivated yet quite, because it says here, the end is not yet. Now, I hope you understand that I'm a bit tongue-in-cheek here. That means I'm exercising a little bit of sarcasm. I've been to Australia 12 times, New Zealand 4 times. They are masters at sarcasm and tongue-in-cheek stuff. I fit right in down there. But sometimes North Americans don't quite get it when I'm being tongue-in-cheek. So I may say one thing, but I'm just doing it to be a little bit sarcastic just to get its thing. Anyways, so when I say the end is not yet, that's good news. It really isn't good news, but at the same time, if we're using it as motivation, it's bad news. Then it moves on. It says, for nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. Any heard of any earthquakes lately? Famines, pestilence? Yeah. But here's interesting. We hear of all these events that are taking place. And really, what influence could I have over any one of those prophecies? I can't make the earth rumble and create an earthquake. I can't, make the environment go sideways so we have a big pestilence or a famine, and I can't control whether somebody wants to say they're Christ, and I can't control whether some country in the Middle East wants to fight someone else in the Middle East. I have no influence over it. I'm just some little peon in a back street in some city in Canada. So really, how relevant is it for me? I can't do anything about it anyway. So you sit there, okay, it's coming. So you know what a good Christian should do? Tongue-in-cheek again, please. You know what a good Christian should do? Sit in their pew, study prophecy, get it all figured out, and stay there warm in the pew. Now that's tongue-in-cheek. But you know what? I think that's what we do a lot of the times. Verse 8. Oh, more good news. And these are all the beginning of sorrows. Oh, okay. So we know the end isn't quite yet. So no reason to really get a motivating factor. We're the light of the world, but we don't have to build a fire under ourselves quite yet to get us motivated because it's not yet. Move to verse 11. And many false prophets shall rise and deceive many. Satan is the great deceiver, the great counterfeiter, the great forger of everything that God has ever done. So obviously, if he's got people out there in the world, there's going to be all sorts of deceptions. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. Pick up any newspaper anywhere in the world, and you are going to see and understand that the love of many has definitely waxed cold. And so I was studying all these prophecies, spending hours and hours and hours studying prophecy. I got to thinking, so what? I can't do anything about it anyways. It's out of my control, out of my sphere of influence whatsoever. Every single prophecy in the Bible, that is except one, every single prophecy in the Bible is in the realm of it's out of my control, it is out of your control. You can't do anything to influence it one way or the other. You have no input, nothing. So it feels a bit irrelevant for me. And yet I was studying prophecy all of a sudden one day. This verse in Matthew 24 hit me square in the face. And here's what it says, verse 14 of Matthew 24. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, And then it says, and then shall the end come. That slammed me in the head for two reasons. I got a double barrel shotgun of impact hit me on this one here because two things jumped out at me immediately. Number one, this gospel will be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. This one is different than all the rest. It says then. When it says then, that means this is the critical one. See, before that it says the end is not yet, and this is the beginning of sorrows, but this one says then. So before this we can say, okay, yeah, irrelevant, irrelevant, and it doesn't really apply, can't influence in any ways. And all of a sudden it says, this one's the one. This gospel will be preached. Okay, that's the one thing that hit me. But the thing that really slammed me in the side of the head here was this. This gospel will be preached in all the world for witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Now, what else could I find in there? Well, here's what hit me. This absolutely blew me away when the Holy Spirit just let me see what was going on here. Of the hundreds of prophecies in the Bible, hundreds, if not thousands, of prophecies in the Bible, they all share, all of them, one thing in common. You and I have no influence, no input to change the course of history, to change the prediction, to do anything. We're irrelevant to the prophecy. And only one prophecy out of hundreds is radically different than everyone else. Why is that? Because it says this gospel will be preached by someone, and that is me, that is you, because we are the light of the world. Here's what's important to know about that. This prophecy is different because you and I have everything to do with when Jesus comes. You and I have absolutely everything to do with when the last days happen, when it's all over with. It is in your hands, it is in my hands, because it says it will be preached. By who? By the big gun evangelists who carry the 44 Magnum pistols around, and we're going to give them money so they can reach more people, or maybe it's television, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that. No, my friends, you are the light of the world. You are the one who dictates when this prediction will take place. Yes, the rocks will cry out to finish the work if we don't do it. And a friend of mine just told me the other day, unbelievable, he says, the rocks could very well be DVD ministries because the DVDs of ministry is going all over the world because they're so cheap to produce and they can just spread them like autumn leaves. Yeah, if you don't want to open your mouth, maybe the DVDs will finish it. But that's not God's plan. He wants to give you the abundant life. He wants to give you the relevant life. He wants you to sense that there is a plan, there is a purpose for your life. He wants you to be in on the reward of the joy that takes place in heaven when one lost soul comes to Jesus. That can be part of yours. When they're singing and dancing in heaven for joy, you should be singing and dancing on this earth for joy for that one lost soul if Jesus is living in your heart. You see, that one prophecy is so radically different than every other one that I think sometimes we just kind of overlook the whole thing. We don't even see it. But I want to tell you, friends, we study prophecy till the cows come home. We regurgitate it and we look at it this way and we look at it that way. And you know what we unfortunately do most of the time? We go to church, we study prophecy, we wipe our hands because we've been working hard on studying all this stuff, and we sit there in the pew and we absolutely just warm the pew forever. Well, I want to tell you, you know what the most hypocritical prayer ever given is? I want to talk to you about the prayer that's the pinnacle of hypocrisy. That's when you come to church, you do your routine, you pay your tithes, you go to church week in, week out, and if you're really something spiritual, you go to a prayer meeting in the middle of the night or whatever, middle of the week or whatever else. So that's if you're really sizzling. But the height of hypocrisy in any prayer is this, where we pray, come Lord Jesus, quickly, while we're sitting in the pew warming it when the lost are out there dying every day without the good news. That is hypocrisy in the nth degree. To sit there and warm a pew and say, Jesus, we want you to come quickly. We're sick and tired of this mess. Come quickly. When it is in your hands when Jesus comes, because this gospel will be preached by you, by me, by everybody who's involved. And if that doesn't stir you, then maybe you need an atomic bomb put under you to wake you up. Because prophecy isn't meant just so that we can all comfortably sit with our little with our little building over top of all our lit candles, so we're nice and dark out there, but nice and light inside here. And we sit there, we study prophecy, and we know the end, and we're just even have more resolve to sit in our pews and warm them and discuss this prophecy stuff more and more. We're really good at that. But the bottom line is this: that isn't what ministry is. That's what we're getting in this program. It's about getting outside the church. It's not about sitting in here. I want to tell you, friends, those people who are categorized in the Bible as lost, those who are postmodern seculars, those who don't have the hope you and I have, they are hungry, they are desperate. Because the bottom line is this: they read and listen to the news and watch the news on TV just like you and I do. I want to tell us, even though I've never been hooked up to television in my life, the point is this: I get out and I see the news sometime in a motel room or somewhere else. I'm watching the news and it disturbs me, and I know what's going on. What do you think it does to the person who doesn't have a clue what's going on, and yet they see the world closing in? I mean, floods in New Orleans and buildings dropping in New York and earthquakes leveling cities. And this is not just happening over some overseas place where, oh yeah, well they got bad rocks underneath them and the earth shakes now or whatever. It's happening here in North America. I want to tell you something. Whole nother topic. But the Bible talks about 4 winds of strife being released in the last days. They are being released. Angels holding back Satan's work of destruction. They're holding it back. But it's getting so intense that their grip on it is slipping, or they're just, God's allowing them. And so the whole earth is falling apart right now. Think about it. When have you heard of more disasters and things happening any time in history? Even the animals are going nuts. I never used to hear about some ape tearing someone's face off and some dog killing somebody and some owner of a dog getting ripped to pieces and losing a limb. I'm hearing that kind of stuff all the time. That's just the domestic animals. What about the bear attacks and cougar attacks and all these things we read in the news, and to say nothing about human attacks? Sometimes we think safety is in domestic animals and that kind of thing. No, people are the worry. When I used to go out in the bush all the time, because I love the bush, I spent years with my Jeep out in the bush, in the wilderness, sleeping under the stars. I didn't worry about animals because I grew up doing that. What I worry about more is some wild human out there in the wilderness that I would have to worry about. Not some bear that might be ambling along in the middle of the night. It's some wild human that I worry about, because that's what's going wrong with society right now. Yes, prophecies told us that stuff. But the bottom line is, you want it all to end? You sick and tired of it? Don't pray about it. Get out there and be used by Jesus just as he designed you to be used. Because if you're the light of the world, you're going to do that. And that's what prophecy is for. It's to let us understand, what is the last great prophecy that has everything to do with you? It is this gospel will be preached. So my friends, we can no longer play church. We can no longer, have our little organizations, whatever denomination you are. We can no longer have our little groups and we have our little hierarchies and everything else. We're trying to hold all this together. Meanwhile, the world around us is falling down. The people are dying. We are absolutely responsible for those people who die. The Bible's clear that we are witnesses. Here in Acts 22, 14, 15 tells us this. Because we have to understand what the Great Commission is all about. 22, 14, and 15. And he said... This is now Ananias talking to Paul. Because remember, Paul was on the road to Damascus to persecute Christians. And yet, as a persecutor, he's saying that from his mother's womb, if not the foundation of the earth, he was within God's plan. Not that God planned on to be a persecutor, but God still had hope for Paul, that Paul would one day say yes. He had a plan for him, even though God was saying, oh, shoot, I just wish you'd turn sooner than you have, but here's what happened. So Ananias is telling him, and he said, the God of our fathers hath chosen you, that you shouldest know his will, and see the just one, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth. For thou shalt be his witnesses unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. That is the commission. You shall be witnesses of what you've seen and what you've heard. Now, if you look at the Greek word for seen and the Greek word for heard, you can expand it a bit. The word seen, you can also say experience. And for the word heard, you can also say understand. So if you reword it using other Greek words for it, or English words from the Greek language, It says, for thou shalt be his witnesses unto all men, what thou hast experienced and what you understand. What have you experienced? If you experienced nothing, then you don't have a relationship with Jesus. Because if you have experienced something, I know one thing, the devil's going to be shooting out a minimum rubber bands at you because he doesn't want you doing what you do. He doesn't want you having a relationship with Jesus. So if everything's nice and quiet, your church is quiet, there's no problems, anything else, think again. If the deceiver hasn't been woken up by your church, then there could be a problem. If he hasn't woken up by your life, then there could be a problem. This is what I tell people, because we're going to get into this series next. How do you actually find Jesus? When we get into that, I can tell people this, I can guarantee this. For a time, you're going to be hit with all sorts of problems for a time. Because the devil does not want you to wake up to the reality that God does have a big plan for you. He doesn't want you to wake up to the reality that God needs you. You know, here's what we sometimes forget. We sometimes, we could assist God. No, God needs us. Why? Because we are his hands, his feet, and his heart on this earth. What does that do to you? Jesus, when he's talking to his disciples, talking about the end work, the harvest time, the very thing we're talking about here, witnessing. Jesus says, the fields are absolutely right. I want you disciples to pray to the Father for more harvesters, more people willing to go out there and witness. Why would Jesus, the Son of God, yes, in human flesh, but why would Jesus ask us, the disciples, to pray for more people to finish the work? It's because God needs us to make those petitions before the universe. He needs us to make those petitions so that when he answers those petitions and Satan comes accusing God, because we know Satan accuses the brethren both day and night, but when Satan comes accusing God, which he's done from the foundation, from his first rebellion, God can simply say, my child, ask in the name of my son, and that's what accusation gone. So God asks us to pray for these things. God needs you. He needs me. And he says, and he went so far as to say, I took the torch out of my son's hand, who was the light of the world, and I put it in your hands. And just as I sent my son, he sent you to do what? Same thing I sent my son to do, seeking to save that which was lost. My friends, that's the responsibility that God has given you and I. It is above being commissioned. I mean, if the President of the United States came to me and said, I want you to hand out Dixie cups on a corner street, and he gives me no reason why I should hand out empty Dixie cups on a corner street in Washington, D.C., I would consider it an honor because the President asked me to do something. I mean, just to meet the guy, for crying out loud, but then to say pass out empty Dixie cups without any reason for doing it, I'd do it. And yet God is saying, Dixie cups, forget about it. I want you to be an evangelist for me. I want you to go out there. I want you to seek and to save that which is lost. When in heaven, I want to stand there. I want my son to stand there at the gates of heaven and not just say, well done, thou faithful, good and servant. No, I want my son to be able to stand there and run to you as you run to him and engulf you in the biggest hug you've ever experienced, saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. Allowed me to use you when we're down there so I can continue my work. Yes, we are not the light within ourselves. It's the Holy Spirit through us. But we have been commissioned to carry the torch. And we are in end times. And you can study prophecy all you want. And if it just leads you to sit in your church pews and think you understand it all, and it doesn't jar you out of that pew, out into the world, where you finally engage in the only prophecy that matters, then, my friends, your life is a waste of time for yourself, and it's a waste of time for God. Because this gospel will be preached. It doesn't say it might be preached. It will. By who? It's by you, and it's by me. And we should never forget that fact. Prophecy, the only prophecy that matters to you and I, is the very one that brings Jesus back. This gospel will be preached. My friends, find Jesus, go out, open yourself to be used by him, and join in the very final finishing of the work, because that's the only prophecy that matters.